The 2021 Formula 1 season just ended in a most unexpected yet controversial way possible. Now, we were expecting some tension between the two title rivals Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton at Abu Dhabi's season finale, but nothing like what we actually got. But why is everyone talking about this race in such a negative connotation? And what does it mean for the future of Formula 1 and for Max Verstappen's first world title? Let's find out. Okay, so both the action and the drama started in the first lap at this race. So going into the second straight on the first lap, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen were headed to turn 6 and Lewis Hamilton was actually ahead. But Lewis actually made the mistake of leaving way too much room on the inside. I don't know why Lewis was doing this, and Max Verstappen just sent one down the inside. Now what happened next was that Max was actually able to make the corner and stay within the white lines without touching Lewis's car. So from Max's standpoint, it was actually a very good dive bomb, and it didn't cause any damage, nor did he leave the track and gain an advantage. But the problem here was that Lewis Hamilton did not expect this launch to come in such an aggressive way, and instead of just backing off, he just pinned it through the runoff and gained a huge advantage from Max due to cutting both the corners in what is a slow chicane in turns 6 and 7. So this was the first controversial moment because, in my opinion, Lewis Hamilton really should have given this place back, and I think that the stewards made a huge mistake because a lot of people are saying that Max Verstappen was overly aggressive at this corner, but I really don't share that opinion because he didn't touch Lewis and he made a clean move. And I think that this is within the bounds of what Formula 1 racing should be. Now, it was an aggressive move, of course. Max is an aggressive driver and he goes for the moves when they are there. But I think that this particular one, unlike Brazil, was not over the line. So sometimes you need to actually ask yourself the question, would the result have been the same if it was grass or gravel instead of an asphalt runoff? And in this case, I think that the result would have been much different. So I think that had we had a gravel trap or a grass runoff outside of turn 6, I think that Max would have made the same launch because, after all, he kept it within the track limits and without touching Lewis, but I think that Lewis Hamilton would have needed to back off and therefore Max would have gained the position in an overtake without contact and with fair racing. Just the difference was that Lewis would have needed to slow down a lot more, but I think that at that point he was in a position where if he slowed down, I think that he could have made the corner. So this was a situation where I think that Lewis really gained an advantage by cutting the track, and I think that the decision not to hand the position back to Max was really controversial, and it was the first of many mistakes in stewarding this weekend, so it's something that I really don't want to see again. And for those of you that are saying that a driver can leave the track and gain an advantage and not be penalized, I think that the example that we saw in Brazil, and if you see the video of another Formula 1 YouTuber called Aldas, he makes the same point that we cannot run ourselves by the standards run in Brazil. And just a few years ago, we had that incident with Lewis and Seb, where Seb lost control of his car and gained a small advantage through cutting a corner in grass, but not purposefully, and he was penalized. So I think that Lewis' infraction in this case was much bigger than Seb's back in 2019. So I think he should have been penalized, and in my opinion, this was the first controversial moment of the race and the key moment in deciding the title. Okay, but now let's actually talk about my highlight of the race, and that was Sergio Perez. But just before I get to that, if you guys are enjoying this video and you guys enjoy the content I make in this channel and this is the third or fourth video that you watch, well, please consider subscribing because it helps out the channel a lot. And I did have a goal of closing the year with 700 subscribers, and I'm just 10 subscribers away as of recording this video. So if you guys could help me by pressing that subscribe button, it would help out the channel a lot. So thank you. Okay, but now back to the video. I need to talk about that defensive driving from Sergio Perez against Lewis Hamilton. Now, this was one of the most amazing moments in racing that I've ever seen, and honestly, I did not expect this kind of racing from Sergio. So, you know that the two best drivers at saving tires on the entire Formula 1 grid are Lewis Hamilton and Sergio Perez. For some reason, both of these drivers really understand the Pirelli rubber better than anyone else, and it really showed. So in this race, both Max and Lewis pitted very early, and Lewis Hamilton came out ahead of Max Verstappen, and by this point had an advantage of about 8 seconds. But what Red Bull did, since Perez was in third and Bottas was nowhere near the front in order to cause a strategic headache to Red Bull, was that Red Bull actually let Perez on old soft tires stay ahead in order to try and stop Lewis Hamilton. And if you were like me watching the race, you were thinking that Lewis might have been unlucky and came out to Perez in a slow state of in a slow part of the track, but when it came to the first DRS straight, Lewis would have been able to pass Sergio very much easily. I don't think that Perez's behavior was actually bad at all, because if you think about it, there's about 4 different rules of engagement in Formula 1 that you cannot break, and if you don't break them, then it's really hard fair racing. So Sergio Perez did not push Lewis Hamilton off the track, it didn't make contact with Lewis, it didn't force Lewis wide at any point in this circuit, and it didn't weave in the braking zones in order for Lewis not to get past him. So if Sergio Perez did not break any of these 4 rules of engagement, then why was it not fair racing? Sergio Perez was just driving slowly, and you cannot blame a car for driving slowly, or else you wouldn't be able to have the Haas on the grid. So Sergio Perez was just doing the teamwork, just doing what the team had asked of him, and he was doing an amazing defensive job by parking the car in the right places. Now notice that Sergio Perez wasn't stopping his car in the fast corners, that would be dangerous driving, but parking the car on the apex in the slow corners and wait before you hit the throttle is just the best way that you can defend from a driver with fresh tires, and I think that Sergio's defensive driving was actually amazing. But the reason that I say that Sergio actually gave Max the championship is because had Lewis been able to get past Sergio in the first corner and not lose those 9 seconds to Max, then Lewis would have been able to pit under the virtual safety car that came from Antonio Giovinazzi's retirement, and he would have been able to pit under the VSC and stay ahead of Max. So this literally gave him the championship, because once that VSC came out, Max was able to pit and Lewis wasn't. So this was a crucial moment in the championship, and I think that if Red Bull can say that they won the Drivers' Championship, they owe it to Sergio Perez, and I hope that they renew his contract for another 3 or 4 years. So now to the most controversial part of the race. So with just a few laps to go, Nicholas Latifi actually crashed and required a safety car. So thankfully Latifi was okay, but this was a very big incident, and his car, as you can see on the screen right now, was pretty much destroyed, so this was very much an incident worthy of the safety car. But this was not the controversial part. So for the second time in a row, Max Verstappen was actually inside of Lewis Hamilton's pit window, which meant that for the second safety car in a row, Lewis Hamilton could not stop for new tires and had to stay on those old hard tires, because imagine what would have happened had Lewis Hamilton pitted, then came out in second place behind Max on old tires, and had the race ended in safety car, and Max Verstappen would have been world champion, because Mercedes had made the worst strategy decision in history. So this would be the worst way to lose a championship, and Mercedes knew it, so they left Lewis out. But immediately after seeing that Lewis was out, Red Bull actually took a new set of soft tires, and now the advantage was very much on Max Verstappen's game, because he was in second place with 1 lap old soft tires against Lewis Hamilton on 38 lap old hard tires. So very much advantage Verstappen if the race restarted. So with just 2 laps to go, the marshals finally cleared Latifi's car out of the track, but now there was a problem. There were 5 cars between Lewis and Max, and what should the FIA do? So in my opinion, they had two choices following the rules, which were either to let all of the lapped cars by or let neither. So if they let all of the cars by, they probably would not have time to restart the race, because they would have required an extra lap, and if they had taken that extra lap, once the safety car came in, Lewis Hamilton would just have crossed the finish line and become world champion. And the other alternative was to not let any of the lapped cars unlap themselves, and what this would mean was that we were going to have a 1-lap shootout between Max and Lewis, but with 5 back markers between them. So the time that Max would have needed to travel through these back markers would mean that Lewis would have had such a big advantage that by this point in the race there was nothing that Max could do to recover the championship with 1 lap to go, because having to unlap himself from 5 cars would really put a big gap through him and Lewis that even those brand new soft tires would not have been able to compensate. But what happened here was actually a very controversial decision that I think ruined the race, because Michael Masi, the race director, actually banned the rules of Formula 1. So the rules of Formula 1 state that either all of the lapped cars must be allowed through or neither of the cars can be allowed through. And what Michael Masi did was actually let only the cars between Lewis and Max unlap themselves, but the cars from second place back were not able to unlap themselves. And you can understand why this is really controversial, because what this is making so is that Lewis and Max are side by side, but all of the drivers behind them don't really have a chance. So Lewis and Max were side by side without any lapped cars between them, but the car of Daniel Ricciardo, which was actually right behind Max and it was a lapped car, was between Max and Sainz. So this left no room for Sainz to actually battle for P2. So this was very much a decision made for the show, and I think it was a very controversial decision, and I think that it was the wrong decision, because if they wanted some final lap shootouts for the excitement, they should have just red flagged the race and, just like they did in Baku, had a 4-lap sprint at the end. But now to let some of the lapped cars by between the two title rivals and not let the other cars by, it was a really controversial decision. Now, I think that if this wasn't the final race of the season and if it wasn't between the two title contenders, I think that there was no way that the race would not have ended under a safety car, or that all of the cars would not have been able to lap themselves, because this was a decision made so that Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton would have had a last lap shootout, and this was what handed Max Verstappen the championship, because, as I said before, with 5 lapped cars between them, there was no way that Max Verstappen would have been able to get past Lewis and win the championship. But with no lapped cars between them and with such a big tire offset, even if Lewis Hamilton did the best defensive driving of his career, there was no way that he was going to let Max Verstappen, there was no way that he was going to keep Max Verstappen behind him, because the tire advantage at that point was so big that no car advantage or no driver advantage would have played in Lewis's hand, even if he did everything he could. And believe me, he did everything he could to try to defend the championship, but the superior traction of those soft tires really spoke louder than anything that Lewis could do. And I think that Mercedes is very much within their right to appeal the decision, but I also think that there's nothing that Mercedes can do to overthrow Max Verstappen championship. And I just also want to end this video by saying that even though I'm saying that Max Verstappen was handed the championship in the last lap, I think that Max Verstappen drove an outstanding season and he thoroughly deserves this championship, because he drove better than Lewis for this season, in my opinion. And in my opinion, the Mercedes car and the Red Bull car were really on equal footing for most of the season. There were a few races where the Mercedes was hands-on the best, and then others where the Red Bull was hands-on the best. But over an average of the season, I think that Mercedes and Red Bull had a pretty equal car on their hands, and I think that the best driver won in this case. And you need to take a look that, with the exception of Hungary, where Max Verstappen actually had that incident with Bottas, in every single race that they finished, he either finished first or second. So let that sink in. In a 22 race season, with the exception of one race, Max Verstappen finished either first or second in every single race that he finished, and this consistency is what handed him the championship. So I think, even though there's a cloud of controversy around this championship, I think that Max Verstappen is very much a worthy champion, and this season is going to be in the history books as one of the best ever, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to make a full season review, which is going to be even longer than this video, with you guys over the next coming weeks. So let me know in the comments down below what you want to see for that video. But in the meantime, that's been it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you will enjoy my latest video right here. So this has been it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.